A gute Woche. The Rebbe soll gesund sein began the Farbrengen this afternoon, and he said that the main reason for today's Farbrengen is naturally because of the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, which was yesterday on Yud Shvat. If so, the first thing which we should discuss should be an inyan which explains about the Frierdiker Rebbe and is best expressed in his name. And we should discuss his name, especially in light of what the Alter Rebbe tells us in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, that Hashem Asher Yikra Loi B'Lashon HaKodesh, that the name, which any name of something, the name of Lashon HaKodesh is the source of life for this particular thing or person. So if this is yet another reason that we should discuss the Frierdiker Rebbe, particularly based on his name. However, there is a teaching from the Frierdiker Rebbe himself, which he related to us, a word from the Alter Rebbe, as medaf leben mit der Zeit, which means that we have to live with the time, and as the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe, interpreted, what does this mean? It means that we have to live with Parshas HaShavua. And if the expression goes, live with Parshas HaShavua, it means something which brings life to us. And life is definitely not something which is just a bypassing thing. It is taking something as it stands now and as it will stand in the future. In other words, we are supposed to derive from the Parshas HaShavua in Yonim, not only temporary in Yonim, but in Yonim, as the Rebbe used an expression, he says it's a yeshivish expression, in Yonim that have a pa'ula nimsheches, which means it's an ongoing act. Memela, when we are looking to search for a hero in Parshas HaShavua, it has to be such that we have to find a hero which will be meaningful not only now but in the future as well. So therefore the Rebbe says we would rather discuss first an inyan in Parshas HaShavua, and later we will discuss the inyan of the Frierdiker Rebbe's name. If we are looking for what inyan to discuss in Parshas HaShavua, there are many inyanim in this week's Sedra, but it would be most appropriate to discuss an inyan which is in the Parsha of the day of the Yortzeit. We know the Sedra is divided according to 7 days, and there are 7 Kriyim, we give 7 Aliyahs. However, if we want to discuss an inyan which pertaining to Shaykhs to the Frierdiker Rebbe, it would be best to discuss the Parsha of Friday, the Parsha of Shishi. What is mainly discussed in Shishi? The idea of the month. Though, prior to Shishi, in Chamishi, we already have almost all the details about the month. However, in Shishi, the Torah tells us something additional which we did not know until now. What is this? What the portion of the month was, that every single Yid, regardless who the Yid was, the portion of the month was equal to each and every one of them. An asiris ha'efa, this is what the pasuk tells us. That every Yid received an asiris ha'efa. Echad hamarbe, ve'echad hamamit. There were those that when they went out to pick the man, to collect the man in the morning, there were those that took more than an asira seifa. However, they wound up with the same asira seifa. There was a mamit. In other words, the one that did not take a full asira seifa. He came home, he had his portion, which was an asira seifa. The man was a lechem min hashamayim. In other words, we know that there is a lechem min ha'aretz, which we eat, which we live on. Here we are talking about a higher type of feeding. We're talking about the Yidden being fed with a lechem min hashamayim, with a heavenly food. And the mere fact, the Rebbe went on, that the Yidden asked for this food, in other words, this shows that the Yidden had an inner thirst to be fed with something which is a higher type of a bread, which is the lechem and hashamayim. And here we find this very strange thing, that each and every person, regardless who we are talking about, whether it is an infant, whether it's an adult, whether it's a man, a woman, an older person, Moshe Rabbeinu himself, every one of Klal Yisrael got this one portion of an Asira Seifa. Though we know, there's an expression, Lefum Tzara Agra, that as much as a person puts in, as much as one invests, he is rewarded. Here by the man we don't find that. If a person should go and spend a lot of time and gather a lot of man, which this shows that this person is looking for a lot of lechem min hashamayim. At the same time we see, he came home, what did he have? He had the same asiris ha'efa as the other person had. Furthermore, Shabbos, one was not allowed to pick the man on Shabbos. So Friday we got double. Those that collected a double on Shabbos had the double. Those that even did not collect the double. The Rebbe used the expression, there were those tzalachasnikis. In other words, those that wanted to do dafka the opposite. So they wanted to show that they'll go out on Shabbos and they wanted to collect the man on Shabbos. That man was nothing. That man did not last. There was no man on Shabbos. Still, even these people had a double on Friday so that they should be able to have their food for Shabbos in the month which came down on Friday. And this, the Rebbe says, shows us a remarkable thing. How dear each and every Yid is by the Eibishter. Regardless what kind of situation he was in, the Eibishter found it befitting to feed every single Yid with the identical same portion. Gemara tells us that the entire man wasn't the merit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Still, Moshe Rabbeinu did not get any more man than anyone else. And here the Rebbe said, when we're looking, I said it actually earlier, when we're looking to find a hira in the Sedre which has a shayches to Yud Shvat, we have to find a hira which really has a shayches to each and every Yid. Why? The Frierdiker Rebbe was a leader, was a Nasi Yisrael. We know there's a famous expression in Rashi, Hanasi hu hakoil, that the Nasi is everyone. In other words, the Nasi, when is one a Nasi? When he's a Nasi over everyone. So everyone, the hakoil, have a shaykhs to the Nasi. Each and every Yid, everyone is included in hakoil, regardless what level he is on. And we know there are differences amongst Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is divided, mechoite veitzecha, va'at shoyev memecha. And here we are told that each and every Yid has a shaykhs to the Nasi. And the Nasi back has a shaykhs to each and every Yid. And this also we find in this week's Sedra. We find in this week's Sedra, the Pasuk uses the expression, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdoi. The Yidden believed in the Rebishter and in his servant Moshe. So the Torah is stressing the greatness of Moshe. Not for the fact that Moshe was an outstanding scholar. Moshe was a loyal Eved Hashem. And this is what the Torah says, Vayaminu, the Yidden believed. In whom did they believe? In HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as well as in Moshe, his Eved, the Eved of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in turn, Moshe, who was a Nasi Yisrael, and the same by every Nasi Yisrael, Moshe in turn tried to bring into each and every Yid this madrege of being an Eved Hashem, of being a servant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is a level which can be in each and every Yid, regardless of how great and outstanding, or what kind of a low madrege. Each and every Yid can possess within himself this madrege of loyalty to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of being defined as an Eved Hashem, a loyal servant to the Eibishter. And this is what this week's Sedra tells us, how the Eibishter expresses his love and worries to feed each and every Yid, regardless what madrege he's in, what level he's in. Even those that did not obey him when it came to the man. They did acts which were contradictory to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Still, what did the Rebishter do? He gave them the same portion as every other person got. Here the Rebbe went on. What? Continued. What does this mean to us in the spiritual sense? Now we are living in an era of hafotzas hamayonis. We have to see to bring the mayonis, the well of Chasidus, to each and every Yid. So one may say, why bother bringing the well? We will take some water from the well and bring that to other Yid. So the lesson tells us no. It has to be, the response from Mashiach was, Yafutzu mayinoisecha chutza. That it is the mayon, the well, that has to reach to the chutza. In other words, it is our obligation today, just like then we find by the man that the Rebishter saw to it, that in front of every house, man, woman, and children, everybody had their needs. And we're talking about their needs then, it was the need which they needed in food in order they should be able to sustain themselves. The same when we are talking now in the spiritual sense, when it is our obligation to see and bring the mayon of Chasidus, the Pnimi Satira, this will hasten the coming of Mashiach, this will rush the coming of Mashiach. We have to see to bring this mayon, and this mayon should reach to each and every Yid. After this introduction, the Rebbe went into the second Sikha, and as he already told us in the first Sikha, that here he will discuss the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe. We all know the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. Though each and every one of these names are a name in itself, the Rebbe said, Yosef is a name in itself, and Yitzchak is a name in itself. Here they are combined in one person. But they still remain two separate names. In other words, in a halachic shtar, which involves somebody whose name is Yosef Yitzchak, and the name Yosef Yitzchak will be written together, then it's no good. We have to have a space between the word Yosef, and then we can write the word Yitzchak. Which shows us, on one hand, that there are two separate inyanim. There's a hirah which we can learn from the inyan of Yosef, and then there is another hirah, another lesson which we can derive from the inyan of Yitzchak. What is the inyan of Yosef? The Rebbe says it's a befeirish pasuk. Pasuk in Chumash. Pasuk in Chumash tells us that when Yosef was born, his mother Rachel expressed herself, Yosef Hashem li bein acher. What is the whole idea of Yosef? Particularly in light of interpretation of the Tzemach Tzedek, to add, Yosef means to add and increase more banim, more children to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, one who until now had the title of an acher. An acher means he was an outsider. He was the other one, on the other side. What is the accomplishment of a Yosef? Yosef reaches out to this acher and sees to it that the acher is no longer an acher. What does he become? He becomes a bain, a child. A child to whom? A child to the Rebbeinu Shalom. This is what Yosef is all about. What is Yitzchak? Yitzchak is, again, it's an open pasuk. Pasuk tells us, Tzchoik asal yalekim. Stems from the word of laugh, happiness, joy. This is what the word of Yitzchak talks about. Here the Rebbe said, here's the Gemara. Gemara tells us that a certain person was merited and was awarded with Olam Haba. And the Gemara goes on and tells us, why was he awarded with Olam Haba? The Gemara gives the reason. Because he brought happiness and joy to many people. And as the Rebbe explained, not by teaching them Torah, which Torah in itself is an inyan that brings happiness and simcha. As we know the famous pasuk, Pikudei Hashem Yisharim Misamchei Leiv. But the Gemara tells us something else. What did this person do? This person went out into the street and was standing in the street and was saying what we Gemara calls and what is known as batchonas. Who was singing songs that would bring joy to people and elevate the spirits of people. And for doing this, the Gemara tells us he was rewarded with such a great reward of receiving Olam Haba. What does this show us? This shows us the greatness of bringing Simcha to Yidden. Pashat of freien Yidden. Yidden should be besimcha. Yidden should live with joy, with happiness. And this is an Aveda in itself. This is what the name of Yitzchak stands for. Later in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe referred back to this inyan, and he explained that the truth is that there's a tremendous shaykhis, there's a contact between both of these inyan. And both of the Avedas come together. The Aveda of Yosef, which calls for reaching out to those who are yet in the level of Acher, and bringing them that they should be worthy of a title of Bein LaKadosh Baruch Hu. This Aveda has to be done in the spirit of Yitzchak, in the spirit of joy, of Freilichkeit. In other words, when we go out, reaching out to other Yidden, this has to be done in a mood of a smile, of a simcha, of a zufriedenkeit, of Freilichkeit. On the other hand, the Aveda of Yitzchak, which is just explained, means the Aveda of happiness and joy, a smile, a good feeling, a good word, a happy word. This in itself is not sufficient. This is very good. But when is it good? When it comes together with the Aveda of Yosef. When, in other words, we shouldn't suffice ourselves just being friendly and happy and seeing to bring simcha to other people. This in itself is not enough. What type of simcha should we bring to them? A simcha which comes tied into the idea of Yosef Hashem li bein acher, of seeing to it that if they are yet to be defined as an acher, we shall see to it that they should no longer remain an acher and become a ben LaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the inyanim which lie in the name of Yosef Yitzchak. It reflects tremendous drachim and avodas Hashem. Later, as usual, on Yud Shvat, there was a maimah which began. The traditional Yud Shvat maimah begins based on the pasuk Basi Lagani Achoisi Kala, and as we know that every year the Rebbe explains a different seif, a different perek of the maimah. For those that are not familiar, before the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, he wrote a maimah with this beginning, Basi Legani Achoisi Kala. And this maimah was published 35 years ago to be learned on the Shabbos of Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is the Yortzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivke. That is the Rebbe Marash's Rebbetzin. So the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the year of 1950 of Tafshin Yud, gave out a maimah to be learned part on Yud Shvat, and the other part of the maimah to be learned on Yud Gimel Shvat, which is 3 days later, which is the day of the Yortzeit after his mother, Rebbetzin Sterne Sarah, the Frierdiker Rebbe's mother, and the Rebbetzin of the Rebbe Rashab. This maimah begins with the pasuk Basi Legani Achoisi Kala. The whole maimah contains 20 prokim, 20 seifim, and it is since the first Yud Shvat of the leadership of the Rebbe Zal Gesund Sein Lariches Yomim V'Shonim Tovos, since Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud Aleph, that the Rebbe says a maimah Basi Legani on Yud Shvat, and each year he goes through the maimah, but each year he explains in depth one of the oisias of the maimah, and he goes in a sequence. The first year he explained the first ois, second year the second one, and so forth. After 20 years Yud Shvat, the 21st year, he went back again to the beginning of the maimah. And today, again, he explained the ois which we are up to now in the sequence of the maimah of the Basi Legani. And this is the maimah which begins with the words Basi Legani Achoisi Kala, which is a pasuk in Shir Hashir. Later in the Farbrengen, as usual, Rabbi learned a Rashi in this week's Sedra, and also explained a Rambam, which has to do with the Shiurim of Rambam, of the daily Shiurim and Rambam, and also referred to a Zohar with the comments of his father on the Zohar. The Rashi in this week's Sedre, in Pashas Beshalach, is with a pasuk in the Shira. Words of praise which Moshe and Kol Yisrael sang after the great Neis of Kriyas Yamsuf. Moshe expresses himself, Shamu Amim Yirgozim, all the nations of the world are hearing what has happened in Yirgozim, they are angry. Chil Ochaz Yoshvei Peloshas. Then the pasuk goes on, this is Kapitel Tesvav, pasuk Tesvav. Oz Nivhalu Alufei Edoim, Eilei Moyav Yichzoi Meiroat. Namoigu Kol Yoshvei Knaan. Pasuk says that the Alufei Edoim, the leaders of Edoim, it's a tumult, got very frightened. The same thing, the Eilei Moyav, the elders of Moyav. The elders of Moyav, Yichzei Meiroat, were caught shivering. Namoigu Kol Yoshvei Knaan. All the people, all the residents of Canaan, Namoigu, it's also an expression like they've been falling apart. Realizing the great miracles which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has performed here to Klal Yisrael. What does Rashi comment? Rashi quotes the words of Alufei Edoim and Eilei Moyav and tells us, V'haloi loi hoya lehem lirei klum. They actually shouldn't have had any fear whatsoever. Why? Sharei lo yaleim hoilchim. The Yidden were not planning to conquer their countries. Meile Canaan, the Yidden were about to enter Canaan, and they wanted to take over all the Yoshvei Canaan. But what was Edom and Moav scared about? This is what Rashi is asking. And what does Rashi respond? Mipnei aninus. They were very sad. Why were they sad? Shayu misoinenim umitztarim al kvoidam shel Yisrael. They were very angry and disturbed why the Yidden had so much covet, so much honor. And this bothered them. This is what Rashi tells us. So the question here arises, there are many questions which arise. First of all, why only the nations of Edom and Moav? There were many other nations. So the pasuk does not mention any other of the nations, just whom? Edom and Moav. Edom and Moav are referred to by name. The truth is, when the Yidden went into Eretz Yisrael, they were told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Na al tatzeres Moav, that you should not start up with Moav. However, the Rebbe says, there are certain commentaries on Rashi which are trying to bring in that commandment and tie it in over here. The Rebbe says, but the child who's learning Chumash, we're talking about a Ben Chumash Lemikra. Ben Chumash Lemikra, and Rashi is learned, Pirush is geared in the derech of Pshat, Pshutu Shel Mikra. So for the child who's learning Chumash, and every word is extremely accurate in Chumash, as well as in Rashi, child yet is not aware that later the Rebbe told the Yidden not to start up with Moav. The lands of Edom, they also didn't conquer. The territory which the Yidden really conquered was the territory of Canaan. Truth is, if we look weiter in Parshas Balak, who was the king of Moav, he was very much afraid of the Yidden. He expressed himself that the Yidden will come and will eat me up, kilchoich hashoyres yerek hasoda. Just like the ox finishes the grass in a field, the same thing, the Yidden will finish up him and his entire nation. What do we see from this pasuk? From this pasuk we see that Moav did not know yet that the Yidden are going to be told in later years not to start up with him. He was very well afraid of the Yidden. So why does Rashi say, they had good reason to be afraid? And as we find in the psukim weiter that they were afraid. They were definitely afraid of the Yidden. Truth is, we find that regarding the other nations, the Yidden didn't really wipe out the other nations. The Yidden gave them various alternatives. The Yidden, first of all, they were paschu b'shalom with everyone. They gave a an alternative of peace to each and every one of the nations. And Taka, we find that one of the nations, the Girgashi Pana, what did he do? He picked himself up and he left. He didn't want to get into any battles with the Yidden. He realized that the Yidden are going to take over Eretz Yisrael, and therefore Pana, he left. It's strange here. What is happening? Edom and Moav, Rashi is telling us they really shouldn't have any fear. From the Psukim we see that they did have a lot of fear. And on the other hand, the question arises, why Dafke Edom and Moav and not anybody else? And all of this requires interpretation, and explanation should be interpreted and explained at such a level that even the five-year-old child who's learning Chumash should have an understanding what's going on here. And the Rebbe is explaining it, so he'll explain it briefly in the realm of Pshat. Who was Edom? Edom really was Esav. What was Edom? What was Edom to the Yidden? He was related to Klal Yisrael. Esav was Yaakov's brother. So what were the children of Edom? They were like relatives to the Yidden.
Cousins.
Right? Who was Moav? Moav, they were descendants of Lot. Who was Lot? Lot was a nephew of Avram Avinu. True, Avram Avinu parted from Lot, but at the same time we find that even after he parted from Lot, he was very much concerned about Lot. To such an extent that we find that Avram went and he took people with him and he sacrificed his life to save whom? To save the life of Lot. What does all this show us? That there was a closeness between Avram and Lot. What's happening here? The Yidden are coming out of Mitzrayim, and they're coming out with tremendous covet out of Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is performing outstanding miracles, and the entire world is shivering and trembling in fear when they're realizing here the greatness of Klal Yisrael. However, there are certain nations whom this has a particular touch on, a particular effect. Who is it? Those nations who are sort of, I use the expression, the relatives of Yidden, the cousins of Yidden. Look, we are their cousins, we are their relatives. Look what's happening. Why do they deserve such special treatments and not us? So other nations, the descendants of Ham, there were many nations in the world. The child who's learning Pashas Beshalach has already learned Pashas Noach, and in Pashas Noach he was told that there are 17 nations. So he knows that there are Shivim Ummos, and he's well aware of that. However, all these Shivim Ummos were not affected to such a sinner, to such a resentment as Edom and Moav was. True, we just read a pasuk before that, Shamu Amim Yirgozun, and Rashi stresses Yirgozun, Rashi comments, Misragzin, they got very angry, all the nations of the world. But there were two nations who particularly were hurt by this. Who was it? Those nations that felt themselves, we are equivalent to the Yidden. We had the same Avos, we had the same, the children of Esav. They were related. Esav was the son of Yitzchak. He was Yaakov's brother. So they were saying, why do Yaakov's children deserve such special nisim? Why don't we deserve it? Why didn't it happen to us? Lot children said the same. Look what's happening. Who are the Yidden? The Yidden are Einiklach of Avram Avinu. We are nephews of Avram Avinu. Why isn't anything special happening to us? However, the child may ask one question. The child has learned Chumash Bereshis and is well aware that there were two nations that came out of Lot children. There was Ammon and Moav. Where is Ammon? Why isn't there any referral here in the pasuk to Ammon? Why does the pasuk refer only to Moav? This, the Rebbe says, is already answered in the previous Rashis. Ammon and Moav, Torah tells us, how were they born? They were born after Lot was taken out of Stein. Then they were born Lot with his daughters. And these are the children that were born from Lot and his daughters. So Rashi tells us that one of the daughters named the child Ammon, and the other one named it Moav. What does Moav mean? Moav spells out Me'av. In other words, she's telling everyone that who is this child from? The child was born from her father. The other daughter, the daughter of who gave birth to Ammon, possessed much more tznius within her. And she was ashamed to say who this child was born from. And therefore she did not reveal in his name any indication whatsoever that this child was born from her father. Memela Azoi, Mayav wasn't embarrassed with it, wasn't ashamed of it. Therefore Mayav came out declaring to everyone that they are descendants of Lot, and Lot who was the nephew of Avraham Avinu. Ammon was ashamed to tell us that. For Ammon it would be the biggest busha, it would be the biggest embarrassment to come and tell us that he's a nephew of Avraham Avinu. And he's a cousin or some sort of a cousin to the Yidden. So that's why Ammon was not affected in any way by the great miracles, should show extra anger on such great miracles which are happening now to his relatives. On the contrary, this would be the biggest busha to Ammon, the biggest embarrassment to him, to come and say, he's affected by the fact that there's certain nisim being happening now to Bnei Yisrael. So who are the only ones that were really bitterly disturbed by these nisim? It was Alufei Edom and Eilei Maya. Even Yishmael's children. Yishmael was a son of Avraham, a brother to Yitzchak. The Rebbe tells us we learned also in Rashi that Yishmael, at his older age, Yishmael did tshuva. So Mamela, Yishmael did tshuva, and as we read, all of the other children which Avraham had from other wives, Avraham sent them all away. They shouldn't have no shaykhs to him. He gave him matonis, he gave him gifts, and he sent them away. Therefore, Yishmael's children, or the other children from Avraham, they too were not affected in any way that it should arouse within them any special anger that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is performing special nisim and showing special kiruv to Klal Yisrael. Who are the ones that were really affected and were hurt very much? It was Alufei Edom and Eilei Moav. And this has nothing to do with the fact whether their countries are going to be taken over or not going to be taken over. This was an aninus. A special sadness came upon them, Rashi tells us. Why? Shayu misoinenim umitztarim al kvoidem shel Yisrael. They had bitterness within them. Why is it that the Yidden are getting that much covet? The last pasuk of the Shira. Shira ends with the words Hashem yimloch lo'olam va'ed. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ruling should be an eternal one. And here Chazal tell us, Abba says, that if the Yidden wouldn't have sinned then it would have been an obvious ruling of Hashem, lo'olam va'ed, that the Yidden would have never again gone into Golus. And it would have been obvious and seen le'enei koil that Hashem yimloch lo'olam va'ed, and that the Yidden would, in fact, they wouldn't even have to stay 40 years in the Midbar. Within a period of 3 days, Chazal tell us, they would have entered Eretz Yisrael right away. But unfortunately, it did not happen. However, now the Rebbe says, now we are in Golus for 1900 years. And prior to this Golus of 1900 years, there was another Golus, there was a 70-year Golus between the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash. And here it is definitely Ad Mosai. How much longer will we be in Golus? It is, as the Rebbe used the expression, Kvar kolu kol hakitzin. A kates means the time for Mashiach to come. All these times have already passed by, and there is no other alternative but Mashiach should take come, and Ad Masay, how much longer should Yidden be in Golus? We had enough in Golus already. And time should come when we should see Hashem Yimloch Lo'olam Va'ed, the ruling of Hashem should be obvious, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should take us all out of Golus. Later, the Rebbe went on in the Farbrengen. The Rebbe continued explaining that every year Yud Shvat we Farbreng for the same reason. That Yud Shvat is the day of the Yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe. However, there is something special in this Yud Shvat which we did not have in any other Yud Shvat. What is it? The fact that this year is 35 years Yud Shvat. And this is the only Yud Shvat which is 35 years. Prior to that, it was different numbers. And after that, it will be further numbers. So to have the year of 35 years since the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, this is this year. The Rebbe goes on that the number 35 is extremely significant. From 35, we enter into 36, which means we are entering the 36th year of the Histalkus of the Frierdiker Rebbe. 36 is a special number. 36, the Rebbe says, is Begematria Eile. Aleph Lamed Hey. Eile is equivalent to 36. Eile is when you want to pinpoint on something, a gilui, something being revealed. That is when we use the expression of Eile. It is not a hidden expression. On the contrary, it is something which is being shown. The Rebbe compared it to the Chanukah candles. By Chanukah we find, if we were to take a total, if we were to calculate how many licht of Chanukah do we light throughout the entire 8 days of Chanukah, we will come to a total of 36 licht. In other words, the first night it's 1, the second night 2, so it's a total of 3. The third night 3, so we have 3 and 3 already 6. Until we come to the 8th day, that means after we have lit the 8 candles of Chanukah, throughout the Chanukah days we have lit 36 lichtelach of Chanukah. What is the whole idea of Chanukah? The whole idea of Chanukah is also to bring lichtigkeit. That's what Chanukah stands for. We'll explain at length in all the Sichas and Amarim of Chanukah. The whole idea of Chanukah is to bring light to the outside, to take an area which is spiritually dark, and we bring lichtigkeit into that area. This is what Chanukah is all about. This is what the idea, what this Yud Shvat should remind us. It should remind us an idea of bringing lichtigkeit, should be symbolic to the 36 licht of Chanukah. Bringing lichtigkeit, bringing the Mayonis Chassidus to areas which they are not there yet. The Rebbe went a step further. We know Yemei Shnoseinu Behem Shivim Shana. Average life of a person, as it's discussed in Svarim, is based on 70 years. What's half of 70? Is 35. When we are entering the 36th year, it is already like when a person realizing that he's already entering to his second half of his life, of his lifespan, which brings about by a personal cheshbonus and calculations that he has to start taking things more serious and utilizing his time in a more fuller fashion. And this is the specialty, what this Yud Shvat reminds us. As it's customary recently, that the Rebbe also learns or discusses an inyan which has a shaykhus to the shiurim in the Rambam, based on the division of Rambam of learning 3 prakim a day. And the shiurim of Rambam, which are learned these days, it is discussed the halacha of zeh nehne v'zeh loy chosach, which means if one benefits from something, to the other person it does not mean any loss, and his friend will have a benefit. The halacha is koife noisai, we force a person that he has to give in on such type of matters. And as the Gemara uses the expression, it is considered a midas doim. It is considered, stoim stands for bad people. If one does not want to give in on that, the epitome of badness is expressed to the people of stoim. So if one does not want to give in on such type of a situation, which halacha refers to as zen nehene, v'zeh lo yichasa, he's compared to the people of stoim. So the halacha is koifin al midas stoim. We force somebody not to do the acts of stoim when it comes to such type of a situation. Rabbi says this is a halacha which is, its source is a Masechta Bava Basra. In fact, the Sefer of Mara Mekoimis, which shows us all the halachas of the Rambam, the source of all the halachas, refers all of these halachas to its source in Masechta Bava Basra. So if one wants to really learn these halachas in depth, he can refer to Masechta Bava Basra and all its commentaries, and which are also commentaries on the halachas as they are explained in the Rambam, and he will definitely have a proper understanding of these halachas. The Rebbe says, being that it is customary that we always do mention some sort of a question, some sort of a shayches regarding these halachas, he will just bring out a point, is that the question arises, a shayla in this halacha of zen nehne v'zoloi chosa. The question would be in such a case, there's an individual who can have hanoah from a situation. To the other person, it is no loss. However, to him it is no loss in a certain amount of time from today. Today it is a loss. In other words, if he would give up this amount of money today, or whatever we're talking about, it is a loss to him. However, in a month from now, it will not be a loss. So the question arises, does the halacha of koifinoise al midas doin, in a case of ze nene v'ze loy chasa, one gains, the other one does not lose. However, when is he not losing? First in a month from now, or in a while from now. Now it will be a loss to him. Does this fall into the category of ze nene v'ze loy chasa, or doesn't it? And this, the Rebbe rose as a question, and it was raised this question, which has a shaykhs to the Inyanim and Rambam, which we are learning these days. And talking about it, the Rebbe naturally spoke in the spiritual sense, in the moral sense. The Rebbe brought an example, compared it that if one wants to give it, has to give a sum of tzedakah, and the person knows he's going to give the sum for tzedakah, and he's ready to give it. The only thing is, he is making calculations that for him it may be better, he will get more covet, or for him for his business deals it may work out better that he should give the tzedakah in a while from now and not give it now. Here we are told that this may be compared to a midas time. If you are ready to give an amount of tzedakah, and you have the money and you want to give the money, and you know anyways you're going to give the money, why postpone and give the money later? Just because of calculations which you are making, which are sort of like selfish calculations, which the person feels he's going to benefit by it, it is definitely not so. He has the money, the tzedakah he's ready to give. Why postpone it? Do it now. Do you have a chance to do the mitzvah right now. And the Rebbe went into a Zohar, which is Zohar on this week's Sedrem. The Zohar in Beshalach, his father's commentary on the Zohar, quote a pasuk, Zocho li elikim l'toiva. In other words, where a person is asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I think the pasuk is in Ezra, and he's saying, Zocho li, Rabbeinu Shalom, remember me l'toiva for good. So the Zohar, as well as in the commentary of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, they are discussing what is wrong in a person saying that. And it is explained how a Yid is always supposed to include himself with other Yidden. When we come begging from Hashem, we're not supposed to just beg, be mispal for ourselves. And therefore, when one puts himself in a position and he's saying, Zacha li alikim l'toiva, he's only asking for himself. So as the Svara goes on explaining, if he is a person who is a tzaddik gomor, and it is also a special time by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that is when it may work. But if he is not a tzaddik gomor, or the zman, the time which we are talking about, is not of such, which is a real special time by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then his tefillah is not that much accepted. Why? Because a Yid is always supposed to include himself with others, and not be mispalel in a way of Zocho li elikim l'toiva. And this the Rebbe also tied into the Rambam. It's the same idea. A person is not supposed to be selfish for himself. In other words, always supposed to consider others. If he's in a situation of zeh nehne, v'zeh loy chosa, somebody else can gain, somebody else can have hanoah, can have satisfaction. To him, it will not mean any loss. If there's such a situation, then he's definitely supposed to accommodate this situation, and not show a midas toim, which is total source of shlechts, of ra, and go ahead and refuse such type of situation. Rebbe said later in the Farbrengen, towards the end of the Farbrengen, Rebbe said that being that it is the Yahrzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and there are those people who are fortunate of being considered shluchim, emissaries of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and shluchim de shluchim, emissaries of his emissaries. As we know the klal in halacha, that shluchai shel adam kemoisai, a messenger of a person is just like him, a shliach is just like the person himself, shliach of one. It would be appropriate, the Rebbe says, that from this Farbrengen, for those shluchim who are here and came here for Yud Shvat, that they shall get a bottle of mashke to take along with them to their cities or countries, wherever they are from, and use it there to be able to mix it with other mashkes and make Hasidische Farbrengens and Hasidische gatherings. However, because of Tirche de Tzibure, which means not to disturb the entire public, and not to detain the public rather, this can be done that the shluchim should go into the office, to the Rebbe's secretariat office, to the office of Maskiros, and each and every one of them will Sunday receive a bottle of mashke to take along with them. Also, being that it is Yud Shvat, the Rebbe says he will do something exceptional which was never done in the past regarding the shluchim, and that is, the Rebbe says that an amount of money in a form of a token amount of money will be sent to each shliach. This amount of money, the Rebbe did not say how much, the shliach should divide, use half of it for his personal expenses, and the other half should be used for expenses for his pa'ulos, for his activities which he is involved in. And the Rebbe added on that this sum of money will be sent in one check, not in two different checks. Why? Because the proper attitude of a shliach has to be that his private life and his life as a shliach, his involvement in all of his piyulas, there really shouldn't be no difference between it. In other words, he has to be so dedicated to his work that we shouldn't be able to draw a line between himself in the sense of him having to support his family and him acting as a shliach. And therefore the Rebbe said it will be included in one check, this amount of money which will be sent to all the shluchim. The Rebbe also said that this is the mashke which which the office will be able to give out on Sunday. However, there are inyanim which are taking place tonight, and this mashke has to be given out during the Farbrengen. And that is, number one, the Mlava Malke from Mochin La Yahadus, which is taking place tonight. And the Rebbe spoke the greatness of the Inyan of Yahadus. Yahadus refers to the Eibishter's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. It also reminds us on Yehuda. And what is the idea of Yehuda? Yehuda is Maloshn Hapam Oide Es Hashem. It means a total giveaway, Haidah, as it is explained in Chassidus. In other words, giving in totally to the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi said it also has a shaykhs, a special shaykhs to a Malava Malke. Malava Malke is Sudasa, the David Malka Mashiach. Malava Malke is a meal which has a significance, ties into David HaMelech, and ties into Mashiach. And Mashiach will be a descendant of Shevet Yehuda. And taking all these things in consideration, the Malava Malka from Machon Yahadus, which is taking place tonight, the Rebbe spoke specifically with warmth regarding all the students of Machon Yahadus, particularly taking in mind what Chazal tell us, which has a shaykhs to this week's Sedre, that was in the merit of the Noshim Tzidkoniyas of the women that the Yidden left Mitzrayim. So we see the great power which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given over to a Jewish woman. And this institution, Machon Yahadus, which is raising Jewish women, that they should be able to be proper Akeres Habayis, be the proper head of the Jewish household when the proper time will come for it. Their preparation should be Bahatzlacha, and later when there will be an akeres habayis, it should be with a lot of atzlocha. The Rebbe also gave a bracha that in the interim, those are the students who are in need of shidduchim. It should also come on easy, and it should be with hatzlacha for them as well. And another occasion which the Rebbe gave a bottle of mashke is for the Melava Malke, which is also taking place tonight, for the Vad L'Doivre Yivris, which is for working with Israelis who are here in the United States. And there is a get-together here this Shabbos of Israelis who are here, and they're having a session tonight, the Melava Malke. The Rebbe gave them a bottle of mashke for this Melava Malke as well. And at the same time, the Rebbe urged the importance of all of the miftzoyim, talking about the Machan Liyadus. The Rebbe immediately tied it in also to the three miftzoyim which have a shaykhs to the Jewish woman, and that is the mitzvah of Taras HaMishpacha, the mitzvah of Kashrus, and the mitzvah of Neira Shabbos Kodesh. And as well as each one of the other miftzoyim, mitzvah chinuch, educating, as the Rebbe stressed, educating oneself and educating others, Avas Yisrael, to the extent of Achdus Yisrael, and all of the other miftzoyim, and the Rebbe listed each and every one of them. Also the mitzvah of learning Rambam, whether it is learning Rambam 3 prakim a day, or at least 1 perek a day, or at least learning the mitzvahs as the mitzvahs are in the Sefer HaMitzvahs LaHarambam, as well as seeing to it that each and every Yid should have an ois in the Sefer Torah. Those who as yet do not have oisiyas in Sefer Torah. And by our share in all of the miftzoyim, this will again bring will rush the coming of Mashiach. And as we are about to read in this afternoon's Sedra, as we read, the idea of Parshas Yisroi, the Rebbe referred to Yisroi. Chazal tell us that Yisroi has already served all of the Avodah Zaros in the world. And then later he came and he realized the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the same idea as Yosef Hashem li bein acher, which we discussed. Yisroi was once in the category of an acher. It was an Ovid Avodah Zarah, and not only one, he tested out all of them. And what did he do? He came to Yiddishkeit and became a ben of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and realized the greatness of Torah and the greatness of the Rebishter, to such an extent that one of the reasons why he's called Yisroi is al shem sheyeser parsha achas b'Torah, that he reached such greatness that he even added 1 parsha in the Torah. Which, by doing all of this, the Avodah of Yosef, as discussed, and the sense of Yosef Hashem li bein acher, and the Avodah of all of the Miftzoyim, and Yosef as it goes tied in together with Yitzchak, as explained at length in the Sichos before, all of this will lead to the coming of Mashiach b'mheira.